Thanks, Niall, and thanks, CPA, for inviting me. It's my real pleasure to present the air source to this community. I'm conscious that I'm under communication session, so I'll try to get the balance between what the air source is, what the project is, also main results and our communication strategy or our experience with the communicating the results. I won't go deep into the reasons why we are doing that, why we are measuring the PM and the sources. Emma already did that, and Minister mentioned that the health effects of the PM had been realized for some time now, and it manifested in some policy changes early in 1990s already, and that saved already some lives since then. Also, the tailpipe or curbing the tailpipe emissions of sulfur has resulted in the reduction in the emissions itself, but also the ambient concentrations of the sulfur, over 80% reduction in the few decades. But actually that left us with the situation that now the air pollution or PM air pollution is dominated by the organic matter and carbonaceous aerosols if we include the black carbon. And the sources or variety of sources for the carbonaceous aerosol, it's much higher than we had for sulfur or sulfate and nitrate. So we need a sophisticated instrumentation and techniques in order to determine the main culprits contributing to these compounds. And it's not only in Ireland, we see that all over the Europe and world that carbonaceous aerosol now dominates the PM concentrations. And that's when the air source came about, that we realized that we need to step up to the challenge and establish the aerosol mass spectrometry network in order to look at the sources of that carbonaceous aerosol. So the network enables online quantitative PM mass, but also the speciation chemical composition of the PM and the source apportionment. So we have 3 nodes from the Dublin City, Carson Point as the regional background, and Mace Head as marine background to really see the different sources and different locations. And in a few months, actually, of deployment of the instrument in Dublin City, we realized or we noticed some strange behavior that the concentrations in Dublin City can go above 300 microgram per cubic meter. And at that point, we had a Chinese student. He said, it's the same as Beijing. Like the levels are really high. And as Minister said, we're supposed to be clean. Ireland is in a really favorable meteorological conditions. So why are we so dirty? And another surprise came when we looked at the source apportionment. We see that over 70% of the air pollution in Dublin comes from peat and wood burning, or came at that point. And even today, I heard comments that Dublin is mainly traffic. Now, if you go at the curbside, it might be traffic, but even there, the peat burning or solid fuel burning dominates during winter. But if we go to residential areas where people spend a lot of their time at their homes, we see the solid fuel burning is a problem, even in Dublin, where main heating sources are electricity, gas, oil. Solid fuel is really not the main contributor to the energy. And we said, like, we have to talk about that. Because even the official message was that the traffic is the main or dominant pollutant contributing to the air pollution at the moment. And we said that we need to spread that news. We need to talk to the public. We need to talk to the policymakers. We need to say what we see with our measurements. And we were lucky enough to attract the mainstream media from the RT, TV, and news and radio, as well as main newspapers, press. And what I got also the feedback from the public. After these articles, I saw the reaction. And when when I've heard somebody saying that the people don't realize that the ones who are really affected by that, they really realize. They know what's affecting their health. I received many calls from the public saying that I have a mother or father or myself with a poor health, asthma conditions, and my neighbor is just installing a new stove, and we see the effects straight away. What can we do? And I realized I cannot do anything except communicating these things. I cannot go to their house even though they invited. Can you measure in my backyard? Unfortunately, no, I cannot measure in the backyard, but I can communicate the results and change. And it's not only the mainstream media, also we did the social media campaigns, but also I agree with Emma saying that we need to reach out to our youngest. Like if we reach the minds of kids, or I also do with my students. I communicate to my students, because if I just talk on the radio, just say, okay, that foreigner, she doesn't know anything. Like she doesn't get what's there. But when I talk to students, they understand me, they get me, and then they go back home. They talk to their parents, they talk to their grandparents, and if I have time at the end, I'll tell the real stories, feedbacks from the students that really pleasantly surprised me, how well they understand the problem and how well they want to contribute and how much they want to contribute and explain that. Another thing is that we saw the effects. We saw the effects of the communication or policy, we don't know yet, but that the events that go above the WHO recommended level, the new level in 2021, reduced significantly. And there was a significant drop after 2018 that coincided with the main campaign from AirSource, but also from Sapphire, the research projects pointing to the solid fuel burning being a real culprit or contributor to the air quality. Also, coincidentally, in 2018, there was a ban on the commercial peat extraction. So as a scientist, I first thought, okay, that's the ban that has an effect, and that's why the drop. But then I heard many comments afterwards saying that no, the ban should have not had effect straight away because there were reserves of peat briquettes, there were reserves of peat. So there should be no effect immediate after that. So I said, okay, maybe that's the communication, maybe that's the John's squared and so on, and our communication, and maybe it's reaching at least people in Dublin. We don't know if it's reaching people in small towns, but maybe it's reaching in Dublin. Okay, so in the larger picture, you can see that there is a significant drop, especially of the new, or the events above the new WHO guidelines. And we also, or I choose to believe that the results from these research projects reach the government and the department and supported the change in the policy. They had their mind in the policy or change in the policy for a long time, but I believe that the research showing that it's really important had supported that active change in the policy. And as it's been mentioned several times, that we had a debate in solid fuel regulations in October last year. Again, it's too early to say, but it seems that we see the drop in the maximum concentrations, again, in Dublin City. So the maximum concentrations and average yearly concentrations seem to be dropping already as an effect. But again, we need a longer-term measurements to be really sure if that's not a coincidence, maybe it's just once-off reduction of the air pollutants. But there's another thing that we notice. So this is the composition of the particles, or PM, total PM, before the ban, or the recent 22 ban, and the contribution from sources. And the right side is the after the ban. And we see the changes in the source contribution. As expected, peat contribution dropped significantly. But we also see changes in other compounds. We see an increase in sulfur contribution. I showed that the sulfur dropped significantly, but now we are seeing that return to the sulfur. And there is a question then, is the ban or the economical situation or the situation, political situation in the world is changing the fuels that people are using for heating? And if that's the case, that we need to be vigilant. We need to know what fuels are used, again, how the situation is evolving, if the solid fuels are still important and contributing, and what type of solid fuels are contributing currently to the air quality. And that leads me to another thing, like our latest result that we published in the scientific paper, that we highlighted the contribution of unexpectedly from the firelighters. So this time is the contribution to a black carbon. And black carbon, as some of you might know, it's not only the health problem, or causes not only health problem, but that's very, very important climate forcer. So it's second only after CO2 contributing to the positive forcing in climate. And we have up to 74% of ambient BC, ambient, not laboratory, coming from the firelighters in Dublin City. So again, traffic contributes a lot to the black carbon, but if we are in the residential area, firelighters are the dominant contributors. And again, we said we have to speak up. We have to say it supports our original message. Solid fuels are not good. Because I got the questions, like during radio interviews and so on, can we switch to cleaner firelighters? No, that's not the solution. We should stop burning. Ideally, we should stop burning if we can afford that. I'm conscious of fuel poverty. I'm conscious on all that aspects. But the thing is, in south of Dublin, in Rathmines, Ranelagh, there's no, solid fuel poverty is not the prevailing effect of using those, factor of using those fuels. So people should realize. And I'm really happy to see that the official message has changed. Like it's just before we talked, like before the scientific project results, mostly traffic was blamed for the air pollution. And now we are always hearing that solid fuel and traffic are the main contributors to the PM. And I still have a very brief moment to say that, again, PM metrics is not the only metrics, or the mass, total mass is not the only metrics that we should look at. And I'm glad to see like that now WHO is also realizing that and introducing over the many years of discussion the importance of the fine particulate matter and the number. And that's what we see actually in our laboratory experiments, that refining fuels or processing fuels might reduce the mass emissions, but it results in higher emissions of particulate matter or tiny particles, which again, for the heart effects, cardiovascular disease, might be even more important. So we need to understand those. We need to look at the sources of the mass, but also the number. And our preliminary study shows that the sources are different for the total mass, large particles, and for the fine, small particles that can travel deeper into our bodies, stay in our bodies, and have a more significant effect. And I see that over the time, so I'll leave you with the take-home messages is that the monitoring and understanding sources is important, because without the measurements, our perception might be very different of which sources dominate the air pollution. And we need the long-term measurements in order to see the trends and the effects of the policies.